Someone willing to admit people to the Zoom room? Let's see if Lamina gets that.
I think
You want to do it?
Yeah, I'll do it while you go.
Well, and then I'll switch.
Yeah.
And see if someone else would.
Perfect.
Do I ending the share so we can?
Sure.
Well, go ahead and get started. I think more people are coming. You know, there's a conference where folks are coming from. Hello. Hi. If anyone needs water, snacks, restrooms, there's a sign-in sheet. We'll pass it around once we get started. So I know some folks that need to sign on the way. I don't know if this is anyone's first meeting. So we do an introduction. I think it's actually people's first meetings. People want to introduce themselves, and then we'll go into folks on Zoom to introduce themselves there. Would you like to start, Ms. Octavia?
Sure. I'm Octavia Smith, and I reside at Desert Shore Estates.
Okay.
Oh.
The people on the Zoom can hear you.
Oh, okay.
You're okay with that?
Yes.
Excuse me.
Yes.
This is section.
My name is Octavia Smith, and I reside at Desert Shore Estates.
My name is Mary. I'm a student and I was a secret outside of the internet. Can you name once more? Yeah, that's yeah.
Everyone, I'm Ray Vermeil. I work for Consulting. Hi, I'm Monique Rosales. I work with Community organizing
Hi, my name is Frank Fletchner. I'm with the Arizona Attorney General's Office. I work in the Consumer Protection Section.
My name is Elise Otto. I'm a PhD student at the University of Arizona in geography, working on key housing.
And folks on Zoom, and is it anyone's first meeting on Zoom today? Kind of our agenda for today. This is our first time doing it a hybrid, and there's a little snafu you may have noticed of the room being double booked and a few things, but I think we're easing into being in this space together. A special thanks to Jamie from the Arizona Hunter Coalition for driving down from Phoenix to really help to facilitate through a conversation. I'm going to start with a presentation of really trying to synthesize conversations we've already had. It's not a lot of new information. It's more categorizing work that we've already done, talking about what are ways of addressing some of the issues we see in manufactured housing, especially around utilities. And then I did some research on some laws that are happening in other states as potential solutions to that. So if I'm going to share a few slides, then I'll really kind of quick through the first slides because it's mostly framing up the background of the issue. And we'll focus mostly on some of these potential solutions. They're also in your little packet here around an task force policy priorities. And then Jean, want to introduce yourself to me, facilitating more of the conversation.
No las encuentro. Me dieron la dirección de 2710 Sur Park, pero aquí estoy, me metió a la 37, pero no las encuentro.
Is someone here? I think someone's down in the lugar. I'm going to stop the share for a second. See, alguien que está en el Zoom necesita interpretación. Shares. And for an interpreter, someone who needs interpretation, let us know. They will speak more slowly because we're in synchronization. So, basic premise, and I'll go through a little bit since it's some people's first meeting, but won't belabor much. We're looking at this issue of unreliability, unaffordability, and massive behavioral home parks. Of the 130 residents in the Parks and Tucson we surveyed, it was the number one issue that people identified as overcharging in their parks, even more commonly cited than rent increases. Close behind is overcharging, unreliability, and the rent increases. Something that we've been taking really seriously. There's helpful survey results. Sandra, si quiere escucharlo en español, la interpretación está por Zoom. Aldina, are you all set up for interpretation here? If anyone wants it. So, information about unreliability usually it's not, it has really serious impacts on life and death consequences. As we know from having talked about that previous meetings, or many also know from being in a relationship with people who have suffered from heat exposure. So the current law, there is a law that requires property owners to provide opening and closing meter readings on the bills of residents, but it's relatively not enforced. Also that they charge more than, they can't charge more than based on what your bill would be if you were a single family resident. So if the same number of kilowatt hours you use, if you're sub-metered utility, so the park owns the meter in the home that you live, versus if you were a direct TNP customer, for example, they're not supposed to charge any more than that. In this area of really ambiguous accountability, the utility companies don't oversee these. The Corporation Commission does not oversee master meter utilities. The King County Justice Court has regularly been evicting people who even have $1,300 gas bill when they don't have gas service and still being evicted. Or some of these conditions saying that not paying the utility is not a high bill, even fraudulent bill is, according to Judge Montgomery, not a reason for withholding rent. The Department of Housing, through the administrative law judge, I think I talked about the last meeting, we've been going through a proceeding with them for over a year. They determined in this case in Flywell's Mobile Gardens that the meter reads there were inaccurate, more likely than not inaccurate, so like meeting the substantiation of evidence needed to determine that, and that she determined that she does not have the authority, no jurisdiction over enforcing those alleged charges, which was like a really, I think, an eye-opening and like solidifying what we know anecdotally and what we know from residents' experiences is the case, is they're not giving any recourse from that process through the administrative law judge. Arizona Attorney General, thanks to the Attorney General staff in the room here today, has been going after landlords and talking to residents and listening to people and giving money back, like real tangible actions. We love that. And it should never take that. We shouldn't have to be going after landlords for consumer fraud. It means the problem has already been happening sometimes for years before it ever gets to that place. And behind each of these court cases are brave residents standing up Just making sure that we're always emphasizing that too. Like, we love the attorney generals. They're also not like going around necessarily being like, hey, anybody have a problem? It's a complaint-based system, so it takes people who are willing to stand up and speak out. So I won't walk through this exactly, but if people want to later, this is kind of the different process if you're a direct utility customer or sub-meter utility customer. The sub-meter utility customer can't take advantage of any discounts. I'll just say this is a creative situation and it can be addressed. So I'm going to break these down into 3 categories. The first one is policies to increase oversight and enforcement. One really like low-hanging fruit law require transparency in utility billing. In Colorado, when people get their bill in a mobile home park, it has not just how many kilowatt hours they were charged, it has the kilowatt hours for every resident of the park. Not by name, but this is the total that we charge all the residents. And this is what the utility company charged us. So they can see if a park is charging the residents more kilowatt hours than the park is even coming in, which would actually help in some of these cases where we know that the park has charged more than they were than came in. Another is ensuring that the Arizona Department of Housing is exercising its full authority. And would love to brainstorm in this group what methods could be done to do that. Because it does seem to me, from my reading of the law, and I'm not an attorney, is that they actually already have the authority to ensure compliance, but they're not doing it. So it'll be a question of, is a legislative change need to happen, or is this more of a like advocacy relationship change with the Department of Housing to say like, hey, you don't really are enforcing what you say you're enforcing. I'm so grateful that we have such a knowledgeable group here to talk through that. We've been talking the last couple meetings with the Colorado mobile home oversight program. For those of you who weren't there, who would like a refresher, in 2019 in Colorado, they passed the law to create a department that exclusively focuses on oversight for the mobile homes. So it creates a registry. So each park has to pay $24 per lot every year. And with those funds, they use that to fund an enforcement program. It also means they have a registry of every park in the state. We don't even know the number of parks in the state. They don't have to register anywhere. They don't need a special license to operate a mobile home park. So this will really help to address some of the ways that people are falling through the cracks there. And that one also has the authority to levy fines. It's not a weak scenario. And if they have a violation, they can't raise their rent next year. They have a list right now on their website of 64 mobile home parks. And they say, if you live in this park and your park owner raise the rent, like, call us. Because your park owner probably doesn't have the right to raise your rent this year. The Arizona Corporation Commission over Sub-meter Utilities is another area that could have more enforcement. And again, I'm grateful to have some legal folks in our midst. In 1972, the Arizona Corporation Commission did actively file to try to have oversight over sub-meter utilities in a mobile home park. There's this case, Arizona Corporation Commission versus Nicholson. The Supreme Court of Arizona in that case ruled that in this scenario where a mobile home park charged, in this scenario, a fixed amount for water, they didn't have sub-meters, every home was charged the same amount. They didn't consider the park to be a public service corporation, unless the ACC did not have regulatory authority. So there's this question then of, this is a very different scenario that we're talking about now. We're talking about sub-meter utilities. They are being charged a variable rate. They are much more actively like reselling the utility. And in this process, like, could the ACC have more authority? Would they have to file another lawsuit? Would it have to take legislative change? It could. Some of the text of that decision did suggest that it might require legislative change. But again, that would be one area of wanting to get more understanding of what that process would be. Another legislative change could be requiring that sub-meters are functional and accurate, and provide a mechanism for this oversight. Again, this is something that we probably shouldn't even need to have. If it says you need to have opening and closing readings on your bill, it is implicit in that they have to be accurate readings, but it's not what's happening. So adding language that says you must have accurate readings and have a method for establishing that. And where people could call and say, my bill is inaccurate, I don't think my meter is working, I want something to check it out process. In Minnesota, they did add that language saying that all sub-meters must accurately measure utility service and be installed to American National Standards Institute. So I take one class. Is everything going okay on the Zoom?
No. Let's, at least Kath is getting an echo. Wonder if we get rid of the mic because it's have two sources of. Kath, we're gonna try and fix the echo. Okay, thanks, Nathan. Okay, Ray's gonna talk and you guys say if that's better.
Can you hear me okay now? Okay, great. Woohoo.
Great.
Thanks, guys.
Troubleshooting.
Any other Zoom audio issues right now? If anyone needs interpretation, are they getting it? Si alguien necesita interpretación, ¿lo tiene? The category 2, services for sub-metered customers. We could support transitioning to direct utility services. There are some programs, some of you may be familiar with the POIL program of Southwest Gas, where this was recently ended by the Corporation Commission, but residents could, if there was a gas leak in the line between their home and the meter, Southwest Gas distributed that cost among all the ratepayers with a fee on everyone's bill, a very small fee on everyone's bill, so that when one person did have a leak in their gas line, Southwest Gas could replace it for free. That kind of program for sub-metered utility customers could be put into place, where everyone on their bill has that, 5 cents that goes towards moving to a direct utility customer. Claire could talk a lot more about that. Claire Michael from Wildfire, who works a lot with the Corporation Commission, is on the Zoom. We could extend low-income discounts to sub-metered customers. We've been talking for a while in these meetings about Southwest Gas and how they have a program. They got us data this month. I think it took like 8 months, but we have numbers now. So Southwest Gas has 92 master metered mobile home parks in the state, 27 of which people are receiving low-income discounts. So in their program, Southwest Gas does this voluntarily. They're not mandated to do so. They're mandated to do so in California, and they do it in Arizona as well. So basically the park owner has to agree to the program, and the subsidy is given to the park owner, who must pass it along to the resident. So we could encourage the utility companies to offer that to other customers, like Tucson Water, where we have a very direct advocacy channel, and also could do something like California does, which is actually just mandated legislatively that any utility that provides a low-income discount has to apply that regardless of whether you're a direct or a sub-metered customer. And the last category, protecting assets and preventing evictions. Do you know that so many states, they can't make a profit off of reselling the utility? This is not even a comprehensive list, but at least 4 states say they cannot charge more than they paid. They cannot even include the cost of the meters and the infrastructure. They're like, no, that's a part of your cost of maintaining the park. They're prohibited from charging more than the commodity charges them, which from my conversations with people who work in sub-metering, who are really trying to sell the idea of sub-metering in Arizona, would make a huge difference. I mean, they're advertising saying, Arizona is a great state to sub-meter in. You can totally exploit people here. And we could change that, as other states have. We could prohibit evictions based solely on non-payment of utilities. I know we've talked about this at a lot of our meetings, and been doing some research on states where they do it and how they do it. North Carolina, when you make a payment, it's not considered a partial payment to pay your full amount of rent and not include the utilities in that. So again, for those who don't come to all these meetings and maybe are not in all of the nitty gritty of the legal portion here, is for evictions, a lot of park owners, landlords, they won't accept anything they call partial payment. So they won't say like, oh, I'll just take the rent but not the utilities. They can still evict you and just reject the whole payment. But in other states, they're saying like, no, you can pay that and contest the utility bill, and wait until that contestation has ended to be able to pay the rest of it. It's another no cost solution too. And in fact, may actually be a cost savings to the state, to not be having those people losing their homes. We can implement legislation to protect homeowners from losing their equity. This is another of the major issues we've been talking about month after month, which is if someone is evicted for non-payment of rent, especially, and there's a judgment against them. So often at this point, it's like $2,500, $4,500. We have, I think, eviction attorneys on the Zoom who can give us other amounts for judgments. But until they pay that full amount, they do not have the guaranteed right to sell the home that they own, to re-rent the home that they own, to move the home that they own, until they pay that judgment. So in many, if not most cases, people are losing their house too. We need to end that. That is a terrible loophole. And a lot of states have protections. Colorado, you don't even have to pay back the judgment. You owe the park $5,000. You don't have to pay anything. You have the right to sell your home for 30 days, and then you can get an additional month if you pay the next month's rent. So you can get up to 60 days. In Virginia, they have a law explicitly called the right to sell or rent a manufactured home upon eviction, which gives the right to sell or rent the home 90 days post-eviction. And then in other states, these laws that I don't think that are as great, Iowa and California, it's still better than Arizona. The park can still take the home and they can sell the home. But when they sell the home, they don't actually just get to keep all that money. In Arizona, they just keep all the money. They have to, after all the liens are paid, give the rest of the money back. It's a little, again, these ones are part of why I think they're not that great is they like actually put it into the abandoned property. And then the homeowner has to apply for those funds. I bet a lot of people end up not getting them, but there's some protection. We can expand eligibility for the relocation fund and implement changes to improve its usefulness. There is a relocation fund if a park is closing, if it's changing use, if it is increase the rent more than 10% plus the consumer price index, which this year is like 3%. So if your rent increased 13%, you can apply to have funds to have the home moved. We could change the relocation fund. Right now it's $12,500 for a single wide home and $20,000 for a double wide, which doesn't meet the full cost of moving. There's a line in there that says you can either get the lesser amount of the actual cost to move the home or those quantities. We could just cross that out and put the greater of the actual cost to move the home or these quantities. I mean, I wish it were that simple, but there's, I think, some other complications here that would love to have the AMHO folks chime in more on, who have a lot of experience with the moving of the homes, because there are issues with the moving companies and not having enough licensed contractors who meet the qualifications to actually make the move. We could work with local municipalities and nonprofits to establish mobile home communities or manufactured housing communities explicitly for people who are moving and relocating. Because another one of the big barriers is there not being places to go. So if the city of Tucson, if Pima County said, oh, we'll put in the infrastructure, we'll put in the paths, and we'll be ready. And we don't care what condition your home is. Or if it's a pre-1976 home, we'll help you get it repaired to move it. But that we're not going to say it has to be the new model, because the purpose isn't we're trying to be a park that's going to make the most money as we can. The purpose is like, we want to be a place where you can bring your home to. And one recommendation that one of the people on Zoom today mentioned was potentially moving this program away from the Department of Housing and seeing if is there another entity that would be a better place to legislate that or to administer that. We could also expand the eligibility to decrease the amount of rent. 13% is a lot of money. What if they increase the rent 3% and you were eligible for relocation funds? What if they increase it 5%? Like really thinking through, like, is there a way of dropping that amount to make this so that a lot more people could use it and as a disincentive for increasing the rent? And to include eligibility, and I'd love to flush this out together, for relocation from parks that have documented violations, that have health and safety code violations, that have harassment on the parts of managers, to be able to say, if this is an unlivable situation here, to be eligible for relocation. I think that is almost, Tenant Opportunity Purchase Act. One of the best solutions that has been seen across the country for residents securely being able for their manufactured home to be a long-term, lifetime place to live a dignified and low-stress life is if the residents own it themselves. Comanche Wells, we've talked about before as a park in Tucson. They don't have a lot fee. They have a contribution to the community. It's not called rent because it's not for someone else's profit. It's paid to the collective pot for maintaining that. Collective ownership is, I believe, $160 a month. And most people are paying like around $40 a month total for all their utilities because they're not paying for someone else to be extracting all of that wealth from them. In the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, the residents would have, anytime a park is going up for sale, the residents would get at least 6 months notice in a lot of them. And each one is written differently, and would have the first opportunity to purchase, and then would also have the right at the end. Like if they didn't come up with the money right away, weren't able to make an offer right away. Once someone has made an offer, they have the right to match that amount. So they get that chance to really be able to organize together as a community, decide if they want to purchase it. And the other one of this is the community opportunity to purchase, which would be for like a park to say, actually, we want the community land trust to buy it. We don't actually want to manage it. We don't want the for-profit to do it, but we don't want to do it ourselves. They usually have a TOPA and a COPA together, they call them, to have, it could be a municipality, it could be the city of Tucson, it could be Pima County. And we do have sample legislation that was written by an Arizona attorney a few years ago when we were talking about trying to do a TOPA here. There's a link for that in the presentation. And this is the last one for a go. I see there are comments in Zoom, is building strong and cross-sector coalition for rent stabilization. We're in a lot of meetings where people say, well, we can't have rent control because there are barriers. Like, absolutely, there are barriers. We would need a solid plan and relationship building to do a cross-sector things. At this point, again, I love having the collective knowledge here. My understanding is that a ballot initiative would be the most viable way to go at this particular moment, which it takes like 250,000 signatures. So it would need to be a really broad-based coalition for that. And I think that is it for this. I'd love to turn it over to questions, comments, more ideas.
Maybe we can start with the questions and comments in the Zoom real fast.
Yeah.
It sounds like somebody's in the waiting room for the Zoom. I'm not a co-host, unfortunately. So.
I just admitted.
Okay, sweet. Okay, so Beth at AMHO said AMHO would like to amend the percent for receiving relocation funds to 8% or less and ditch. Sorry. All right. Type of confusion I have. Um, uh, okay.
I can explain.
Oh, great. Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Kath.
Okay. The idea that we had was to lower the percent from 10 to 8% and to not include, like, get rid of, eliminate the plus CPI part, because right now it's 10% plus CPI, whatever that is, 3 or 4%. So it's like 14%. So we thought we might have some luck lowering it to 8% and then just not use this plus CPI. That was what we thought.
Love that.
Maybe we can flag that for more discussion during the policy talk.
Okay.
And then, you can do whatever you want. And then Megan asked, what are the current zoning restrictions to actually creating new parks? I don't know if anyone in the room wants to speak to that. I can speak to it a little bit, but I don't know, Andrew.
I don't. Unfortunately, I'm not in planning and zoning.
I can't speak specific to the Tucson context, but usually new park development happens on the urban periphery because of restrictive zoning in like the existing area within the city limits. That isn't to say that there can't be exceptions made for that, even especially if there's like a strong partnerships. And I think Tucson, if there was any place to do it, Tucson would be a great place to do it because of the role the city plays here.
Do you want to say any more, Megan, about your thoughts behind that question?
Sure. When you were speaking about having parks potentially have reserved spots to accept people that are moving older units, my initial thought was just, will that actually be allowable? Because the intention is great, but if you have all these other obstacles, and the other thing is, I think actually not being able to create even, without those older units trying to be moved in, I think it's already really hard to actually create new parks because of zoning and different restrictions. And so it seems like that's something that should be addressed as well, is how do we actually make this allowable to have new parks, have new communities? And then we can also work on how can you have, even if it was on the periphery outside, like, how do we also then ensure that they will allow for those older units to be moved in potentially? But I do think there's also a really big challenge with a lot of them, the cost to move, the damage cost, it's just really unfeasible to do. And so in a lot of situations, it's better to try and utilize those funds to purchase a new unit and the complication around that. So.
And Melda says, can relocation can it apply when you've been evicted? I heard one case an hour ago, resident was evicted and she owns the mobile home. And Kath answered the question in the chat saying, if you're evicted, sadly, no. Yeah.
To have a relocation fund that is able to move when you're evicted, it would greatly increase the number of people eligible for that. But it would be a very substantial change. If it's something that people are suggesting, people think about that.
Not in response to the question, and I apologize for my ignorance. So you can on their mobile phones.
Okay. It happens every day. They're being evicted from the lot and locked out of their house.
You need to be valid.
Yeah. The relocation fund? The relocation fund is funded by the people who live in manufactured homes. So in that, and someone else could probably speak better to this. Any of the AMHO folks want to share about how the relocation fund is funded? That I can talk.
Trying to do it. Hi there. How is it funded? It's funded by owners and by new purchases. Like when you purchase a home, there's a certain amount that goes into the relocation fund. But I think probably a lot of it comes also from the owners. They have to pay a certain amount every year or something like that. I don't know what the amount is.
Any other questions before we turn it over to Jamie to talk about like, how do we actually think about how we would make a decision about moving some of these things forward? I think it's a good time for that.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Jan. I haven't figured out how to do the video on this. I don't know why. Stepping back for a second regarding if the use of a park is changed or in the event that they close, I believe California has a regulation that requires the park owners to give each resident fair market value for their unit. And that would be a great protection for people. They wouldn't need to pay for relocation. It wouldn't cover the cost of relocation. They would get paid for the worth of their unit.
Great. Let's get that legislation in our next time to really read through that and see the viability. We'll pass it over to Jamie. Thanks for
Okay. Sure. Okay. Sorry about that. It's not what I wanted. It's what I needed for the child. Not that. Awesome. All right. Yes, right. Because my slides are right there. I mean, she has for us. Sorry, everyone. Please stand by. Do you have a PC? I don't know. I have my computer, but I didn't know. I think that's the night you see my slides.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want me to do the clicking for you?
Would you?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Do you want to sit here?
Oh.
Yeah, you may. You need to let people on that and see they go back out of the spot. Picture of it. Yeah. Brown. All right. Good afternoon. I am Jamie Podratz. I am the public policy analyst at the Arizona Housing Coalition. And I am so grateful to join you guys today. I had the chance to really learn quite a bit from Ray and Elise and Mark and some of the other folks earlier this week. At the Arizona Housing Coalition, we really are focused on the continuum of housing. So we were formed about 10 years ago after the Coalition to End Homelessness joined with the Affordable Housing Coalition to form the Arizona Housing Coalition. So we really are focused along the entire continuum of housing, from street homelessness to home ownership. And part of the challenge of representing the entire continuum is that we're such a small nonprofit organization. We have 6 full-time staff. We're based in Phoenix, but really trying to serve statewide. And over the past about 10 years since we were formed, we've been focused mostly on state level policy. So we're a membership organization. We've got organizational members, emergency shelter providers, affordable housing developers, supportive services providers, all of those folks. We have about 350 organizational members who have joined us. It's kind of a professional association around housing, but we're very much focused on advocacy. That's one of our primary goals, is to advance good policy at the state level, at the federal level, a little bit in the local level, but not too much, just because we are such a small shop. We try to show up when asked. We try to show up to speak up for home and support the folks that are working on the ground to address homelessness and affordable housing. So I'm the public policy analyst. I am about 3 years into the job at the Arizona Housing Coalition. And before that, spent about 5 years at an organization in Mesa called Save the Family that provides housing for families coming out of homelessness. So that was my introduction to housing. My background is actually in law. I was licensed to practice law back in my home state of Minnesota for 15 years, and was primarily focused on federal Indian law, land acquisition, and economic development. The only common thread with all my career change is the importance of home and just the stability that home offers. And so I'm so grateful to be here with you all, to be part of the coalition and to be hopefully helping share a little bit about what I know and maybe can facilitate some decision making and prioritizing for the near term, the medium term, and the longer term. So I am very open to, if folks want to speak up, ask questions throughout, absolutely. Let's have this be a conversation, and let me know what you want to hear more about or what questions you have throughout the talk. So for the state, and I wanted to provide just an overview of kind of what's happening for folks that are tracking the news out of DC, the news out of Phoenix, what's happening at the federal and state levels in terms of policymaking. There's been a lot of changes as of late. And at the federal level, we have executive orders. We've got bills passing. We're in the middle of a march toward the fiscal year budget negotiation deadline of September 30th. So Congress is working with a House version of the fiscal year budget and a Senate version of the fiscal year budget right now. We're marching towards a hard deadline of September 30th. The feds have got to come to an agreement or come up with a continuing resolution. That's one option, potentially a 3-month continuing resolution where nothing changes with the budget. Everything carries on for the next 3 months. Or worst case scenario, federal government shutdown, which is possible. It's kind of a showdown in DC right now. And at the coalition, we met with 6 of our federal delegates in DC last week to try to urge them to adopt the Senate version of the fiscal year budget because it's not as bad as the House version. But there are some encouraging things we've seen out of Congress in DC. When the President Trump's skinny budget was released earlier this spring, neither the House nor the Senate version of the budget looked anything like that. So it appears that there is not necessarily a wholesale willingness to go along with the administration's budget, but we've seen strong arming before in over the last 8 or 9 months. So we're hopeful, but realistic about what's going to happen. And we are just 6 days away from that deadline. So we're at a period of uncertainty at the federal level, but I just wanted to relay kind of an update as to where we are kind of federal policy wise. At the state level, the coalition has a couple of different lobbying teams, and we try to work closely with the governor's office to understand kind of where we're at, what the word on the street is in terms of what's happening this legislative session. What we have heard at the state level is, like last year, it's expected that the state budget's going to be lean. We're going to be lean. We're going to be short. We're not going to have a lot of funding to do budget allocations for different projects this coming year. So federal or state agencies have been told to kind of tighten the belt, not expend additional resources, and potentially get ready for a pretty lean state budget this next legislative session too. So that's not necessarily great news. I'm sorry to share it. But it's always a challenge. I mean, we know at the Arizona State Legislature, we operate on a lean budget. We are lean. There are smaller states, much smaller states with smaller populations that spend a lot more money on affordable housing and homelessness than Arizona. So we are trying to work it at all angles. And as Ray was kind of talking through the different policy reform proposals, things that could be on the table, I wanted to kind of categorize some of those, and Ray alluded to it before, but there are different ways to go about things. There might be lower hanging fruit, things that could be pursued outside of the state legislature, which we know the legislative makeup right now. We were going to have the same legislature we had last year. So we got the same players, the same ogres and opponents and allies. So as we think through kind of what can be done, we'll talk a little bit more about how to categorize and prioritize different policy reform initiatives. The other thing was I was going to share a little bit about how the coalition goes about setting its priorities. Some of the work that we do around identifying what's feasible, some of the power mapping we'll talk a little bit about today, and potentially, if we have time, do some exercises and identify different major players around power mapping on these different policy proposals. As well as, and Ray, you didn't see this yet because I added a slide, but just more about feasibility analysis and figure out what is possible this next legislative session or this next calendar year if we're not necessarily talking about legislative changes. And then finally, just opening it up for discussion. So if we move to the next, I already did the kind of federal and state updates, so you can skip that. But this is the categorization I was talking about. As we think about policy reform initiatives that we want to undertake, I like to think of it under 3 categories, really. The first is regulatory or administrative. Is there anything that we could pursue that doesn't require us to go through the ledge at all? Could we potentially pursue something with Arizona Department of Housing or with a different state agency that would allow us to address things through tweaks to the regulations, tweaks to the administrative kind of implementation that would not require us to find a bill sponsor, draft bill language, and then try to get it through the ledge. The other piece, of course, legislative or statutory reform. That's like traditional advocacy. That's where you're finding the sponsor, you're crafting your bill language, you're trying to find your allies and get to a point where you have enough votes to get your piece passed at the state ledge. And the third and final, and this is the most kind of squidgy of the options for different types of policy reform, is that relational reform. So some things that come to mind here are when Ray was talking about access to kind of reduced rates or low income assistance for folks when it comes to paying of the utility bills. That there we have a utility company that has a program that is offering it out of the goodness of their heart. They're statutorily required in California, but they're not necessarily required in Arizona. Is there work that could be done to build relationships, share information, and make the case at other utility companies to pursue that kind of reform and the availability of utility assistance? It doesn't require going to a state agency, doesn't require going to the ledge. You can simply pursue that as a relationship building effort with the company. So these are all the kind of the ways I think of it. It's not necessarily super academic, at least, but it's the way I try to think of it. And then these next few slides, if we go through them, I don't think I captured them all, Ray, as I was kind of looking through the printout. I didn't capture them all, but I did. If you look through the next few slides, we've got these policy ideas, the different things that Ray was kind of mentioning in details and justification from other states that have provided kind of statutory language that we can borrow from. But if we look at all those different ideas, there's a lot there, and they're not even all represented on these slides. But if we think about what could be pursued, one of the steps in the feasibility analysis, so what can be done in the short term, the medium term, the long term, is looking at the power mapping exercise. So if we go to that slide, you can see, has anybody here done a power map before? Yeah. So it's familiar to a few of us. This is kind of classic advocacy 101. And if you look at this, this is really an exercise where you use a whiteboard or you use a big piece of paper and you end up putting people, organizations, different entities on a grid. And essentially you've got 2 axes here, the influence. So most influence is up here. Who is the most influential? least influential or least powerful. And then going right to left, you have this folks who are likely to support you, your allies who might be really supportive, and then the people who are likely to oppose you on different. And it's really important that you tackle each policy proposal with its own grid, because things are really kind of all over the place. But if we tackle it and we zero in on what we want to focus on, and spend the time to identify who's going to be, is the mayor's office going to be with you? Are there certain council members? Are there state legislators? And as you think about state legislators, you want to think about the minority party and the majority party, and who can you assemble or at least identify to start thinking about who do we need to talk to sooner rather than later to either win them over or neutralize them, get them to not fight you on certain things. And that's a lot of what we do at the coalition is we're not only trying to identify those champions that are gonna fight for what we're advocating for, but we're trying to make the case so that we can get the folks who think are gonna oppose us to back off a little bit. If we can justify what we're doing in a way that makes sense with words that they understand, that are going to resonate with them, then we can kind of neutralize, best case scenario, we can neutralize the opposition. So as we think through this power mapping exercise, this is just one phase of kind of feasibility analysis. And if I go to the next slide here, the kind of second step, and I don't even know that we would have time to get to it today. The second step is kind of identifying which of your policy proposals that you've started to do the work in terms of feasibility analysis is low-hanging fruit. What could be a quick win? To my mind, some of the quicker wins might be administrative or relational, things that could be pursued in that way outside of the legislature. Resource sinks, what's something that's going to take a lot of time, but doesn't really have a good chance of passing? And then long-term goals. That might be what Ray was mentioning in terms of common sense rent stabilization. Yes, that's the right language. So that power mapping exercise was one of the things that we had talked about potentially undertaking. We have so many different policy kind of ideas at this point. I'm not sure how we want to identify, Ray, which ones we pursue. Maybe it's by simple vote, or people can divide up and tackle what they're really interested in, because there's all these different whiteboards around here. You could use a bunch. But yeah, so if we think about the broader categories, Ray, that you had talked about, would you recap those big picture categories of policy reforms for us?
So one is the oversight and enforcement. One is the services for some meters. And the other was protecting assets and preventing the excessive charges on evictions.
So is there a sense of one, if you would really like to focus on one or the other, I'd welcome your comments if you want to raise something. Yes.
So I'm curious. I heard a little bit that with the accuracy of metering issues, I heard a sentiment that a requirement already exists for parks to provide accurate sub-metering, but we know it doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So would an idea towards trying to sharpen that pencil and deepen the clause of that requirement be easier to do in some sort of administrative or interpretation change to existing rules than requiring registration of all parks or requiring a 30-day grace period to sell or move your home, which would be legislation and statute. Mm-hmm. So I would, that was my question as to lowest hanging fruit, both big impact as well as what can get done in the current legislative makeup.
Yeah. So that's really speaking to transparency, right? Is that the transparency piece?
I think so, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good one.
If folks on Zoom, anyone on Zoom want to chime in of something you might want to see prioritized, even just for this conversation? We're not going to power map all of them.
And
Let's just,
We can hear you, Jen.
I hate to sound like a broken record, but enforcement of even the current mobile home landlord tenant laws would solve many of the issues that we are facing, but it isn't happening. And I don't know if we should be able to address that non-legislatively.
So Jan, would you see that as kind of the like Department of Housing kind of trying to get the Department of Housing to commit to doing more enforcement, or how would you see that?
I think it has to come down from the Attorney General to have any type of impact on these park owners that are predatory landlords. Now she may designate a department. I know that Frank has been trying to do some things, but most of the issues that are being raised are addressed in the mobile home landlord tenant laws, but they're just never enforced.
We can make up with 3 or 4 groups. You think that's
yeah. So I'm hearing kind of empowering the state agencies or the Attorney General to enforce existing law as one potential priority in terms of power mapping. We're power mapping today as a group. Secondly, transparency in utility billing, which, Ray, maybe you can clarify, is that already kind of within the Landlord Tenant Act, or is it not?
It's within the Landlord Tenant Act, so I think that would be an amendment to called Arizona 33-1413. It's part of the Landlord Tenant Act that basically says if a landlord submeters, they need to provide the opening and closing meter reading, and they can't charge more than the single family residential rate. I think that's where we would include. They must provide accurate readings, and they must provide the total amount that they bill every resident in the park, how they determine their own use for park common areas, laundry room, that kind of thing, and what they were billed. I think that would all be. I'm very open to other thoughts on this.
They can't charge more than they're being charged.
I mean,
I'm just going to repeat that comment for the people on Zoom. The question was, they can't charge more than they're being charged.
They
correct?
can charge so much more than they're being charged.
That would be maybe an additional.
Those would, because all of those would be changes to Arizona 33-1413. I think we bring out the text of that. It's not being able to charge more than they're being charged. Yeah.
That'd be legislative. That'd have to be pursued.
Those would all be legislative of that one section of the law. But so do I do 2 groups on that so far? Is one on changes?
Can we pause? Kath, do you have some comments you want to make? You've chatted a couple of things. Do you have some input before we divide into groups?
Sure. I just know that park owners are not fined very much when they should be. The administrative law judges tend to really favor the park owners, and it's really hard to hold them accountable. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the solution is. If we could up the fines so that there's more at stake, or we just need to get the information out there about what the laws are and make sure the park owners know, and that they can be held accountable. But right now they're just not held accountable.
The park owners know. One of our residents was told the park manager, "You're violating," and she quoted the section of the landlord tenant laws that were being violated, and she was told, "Yeah, we know we are, but we know we can get away with it." So that's the attitude.
I know. I know. Not all park owners, but yes.
Yeah, with many. And And if they know they can get away with it, they're going to do it.
You are correct.
Is this something, Frank, you can talk to, Seth?
On the penalties or
The penalties and also what changes could happen.
one point I was going to make on kind of the categorization, the regulatory reform versus legislative versus relational. I think that in this situation, regulatory reform is not really going to be much of a viable solution, because as we've discussed many times, there isn't a state agency that enforces the mobile home act.
That's the problem.
So the way it's written is that it gives the residents rights, and it kind of puts the onus on the residents to try to remedy them or remedy any violations. But there's not the Department of Housing or some other department that enforces mobile home. The Department of Housing's role is pretty limited in that it only hears petitions. And so I just bring that up in the sense that I think as you go through this and power map it, legislative reform and relational reform, I think, are the two main avenues that are available here. So for example, if this were Colorado, where they have an agency that, does more than when you're going through this type of exercise, there may be more regulatory reforms that you could tackle and have them improve the laws. But here, all there really is this petition mechanism through the Department of Housing, and then you have the AG's office. We're using the consumer fraud statute in kind of an unorthodox way to try to tackle some of these issues. I think it's going to take legislative reform. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, that is, when you look at historically how things get better, it's always going to be like this. Not always, but in many, many cases, it's going to be statutorily required. And that's going to be the nudge. But no, that's a good point. And how different is that from outside of mobile home or manufactured home? How similar is that to just regular Landlord Tenant Act enforcement? I think it's kind of across the board in Arizona. There's no teeth.
Yeah, the standard Landlord Tenant Act, I think, for the most part, operates in the same way. There's not an agency that forces it. Still kind of just lays the groundwork of the rights between the landlords and the tenant, and puts it on the tenant to either bring some sort of lawsuit, or it provides them rights in eviction court, things like that. But there's not a Department of Tenancy out there that is enforcing these laws. And that's different from other areas where there's kind of an enabling statute, and then it gives powers to an agency to promulgate rules and draft regulations and enforce the laws. So yeah, it's a little different. One other note on the how much you can charge the prevailing single family rate in the Landlord Tenant Act. It is somewhat capped on how much the utility is charging. The only difference is that the landlord can charge an administrative fee on top. And so, they can still charge something more than what the utility provider is charging, but it's somewhat restrained in that, the administrative fee is supposed to be based solely on true administrative costs. So that might be something you could look at in terms of how you style a statute in the mobile home context.
How about using fair housing? Fair housing, Southwest Fair Housing is always called in, or oftentimes called in for landlord tenant issues.
It's so limited to like discrimination, protected class, and then of course a lot of that funding.
That's really what this is about. Also, aside from sharing.
Not the way the protected classes are defined. I always want to go for the biggest possible thing. And so I know this is probably idealistic, but I really want that California law where they have to pay fair market value for the mobile home. It's like, if we could just get that, that would so disincentivize them for evicting so many people at the drop of a hat. But that's probably reaching for too much all at once.
I wonder if that would be the third group. It sounds like there's one talking about changes to the law about how utilities are charged in sub-meters communities. And that would include the transparency, that would include the total amount that they're allowed to charge, that the meters are functional and accurate. The second category of the accountability, and maybe that is more talking about implementing like the Colorado-like law, where there's actually a department where they register every part, and there is authority to be able to actually enforce the law with monetary penalties. And then this third around the protecting the asset, whether it's even in a case of an eviction or if it's in the relocation. I guess there are the two categories there that we are dealt with a little bit differently, as the relocation fund doesn't fund any money if people are evicted. It has a power because in some ways it acts like a rent control, because they're very disincentivized to raise the rent more than the limit of the relocation fund. So there's that avenue of reforms to the relocation fund that would include paying fair market value if they increase it that way. And then there's the other of like, if someone is evicted, that they have to allow them to sell their home. I think the power mapping might be a little bit similar in some ways on that. I'd be interested in using the collective knowledge in this room, maybe a little bit more about the relocation one, because I think that we have a lot of specialized collective knowledge on that topic in particular, because it's so niche to mobile homes.
Claire, did you want to unmute and make a comment before we divide into groups? I'm sorry to segment the conversation a little bit.
Yes, sorry. This is kind of in response to something that came up earlier about like quick wins or like non-legislative, non-regulatory wins, which is, I don't know, maybe considered regulatory. But so I know this idea is coming from, I know in family law, there's like unofficial like policy or best practices for judges when it comes to like certain situations in family law. And so I was wondering if there's like maybe an opportunity to however navigate that system. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the system very well, so could be completely wrong. But if there's maybe an opportunity to build those relationships with the courts or oversees that, to like maybe create some best practices for judges when handling these cases, so we don't have situations like one of the cases where the judge was like, yeah, there's probably fraudulent billing happening, but that's not my responsibility, so that they actually know what they're supposed to do in those instances instead of being confused or just like claiming non-responsibility.
Yeah, like judge education, kind of, you're saying?
Yes, and again, I don't.
Or we just take them all out to a fancy lunch and try and teach them about manufactured home products.
Well, I don't fully know like the system, but I'm pretty sure there's like a hierarchy and there's like policies and best practices that get developed for judges. So infiltrating that particular system of that and judge education, but like the decision makers and leaders in that space too.
Megan has her hand up.
And then you Frank.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback on that because I do think that's what happened with the eviction judges in Pima County, it used to be a larger group, and then it was like narrowed down so that there was a better consistency across the board of execution and training. And so, to Claire's point, I just think that that is what sort of occurred in all evictions already. And so maybe there is something more specific to mobile homes that could also be coordinated with the judges.
That's interesting.
Maybe this is too much of an academic take, but best practices for judges, usually that's what the appellate process is for. Like, if they're making mistakes, hopefully there's an appeal that's taken and then they're overturned and they learn their lesson. And, that's how it would work in a perfect world. But I know with these, I think with an eviction court, there probably are very few appeals taken. It's just not that financial incentive to do so. And so you get these problems that fester persist for so long.
Hi, Mike Ashinchi, Alliance United with Tucson. In a second, Sienna, Alliance Intern, and I have to go, but I have a question because I know that for rent around the country in Tucson, for housing, for houses, a lot of hedge funders and out-of-state landlords are buying up all this property and we have more affordable housing. And I'm wondering if there are any laws, anything about out-of-state people buying parks, because I'm assuming it's happening. Is there any regulation to that?
No.
It's a very hard thing to regulate. If other people want to speak to that, it's like there are state laws that preempt that.
I have a different question, but a follow-up to that. My guess is that would be a practical impossibility, as the landowner probably has the right to sell it to whomever they want. But the way when I was in Colorado, they attacked that is by the right of first refusal legislation, that if you're a park owner and you want to sell your park, sure, you're going to get offers from hedge funds, but you have to offer the residents and the housing authority or a nonprofit the ability to step in and buy it for the same price. And they will do so in order to keep it in the affordable pool. So that's kind of the way, in my experience in another state, that's how we tackle that problem.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And then my question or comment was around the California, equity saving model. As I just looked it up, it appears that the landlord in California has a right to sell your home. For whatever they can get, they can take out their back fees and then give you what's left over. But there's no incentive for them to sell it for $100,000 when they only are owed 10. They'll sell it to the first bidder for 12. So that might be a be careful of what you wish for.
I was wondering about that because I thought, I can just see some of them, especially the older homes. I'm selling them $2,000.
Right.
And, here's one.
Yep.
Yeah. So I was into that. Thank you for verifying.
And I know we do want to actually get into breaking into groups for power mapping. But we're looking for someone to actually help us with an appeal. That the case of the Department of Housing with the Flowing Walls Mobile Home Gardens, where it's really an egregious judgment, I believe, where they said we don't have the authority to issue refunds, so the case is dismissed. They didn't even fine them $500 because they said that if they put an opening and a closing reading and they calculated it using the right formula, that it's not violating the Landlord-Tenant Act. To me, that seems really problematic to now have that as this is what the Department of Housing does. This is, we don't care what your bill looks like, how much it was. There was a number. So the Department of Housing has denied our filing for a rehearing. So it's at the state of needing to appeal. That is beyond what I can do in my limited legal scope, I believe. So if any of the attorneys here are interested or know an attorney who would do that appeal with us, I have done a lot of the work of the kind of the basis of it. But I don't know how to do appeals at that level.
So I started writing stuff down just because I wanted to capture like the new stuff. But do we want to kind of go through and just, if people want to self-select, we can star the ones that get the most votes and then divide into groups based on what folks are most interested in? Is that okay? Okay. Anybody real interested in this right of first refusal? Oh, they left, so they might have voted for that. Okay. Utility transparency. Anybody interested in mapping that? Enforcement powers. Bolstering enforcement powers.
Yeah,
I could do
Oh, did people vote over there? Sorry.
Yeah.
Forgot to look at them. This one, protecting the asset in cases of eviction. And I don't know if we want to include or relocation or just limit it. Yeah, one or the other.
It's just do relocation, because I don't think eviction
is feasible.
They're just different processes.
Okay, I'm hearing that's going to be one, maybe. Oh, and then this, I don't know. I just wrote that down but if we're being realistic, it is going to be case law that determines best practices.
Can I read that one? What is that one?
Oh, best practice development for adjudication of mobile home manufacturing landlord tenant act. What if we undertook this one together as a group?
Yeah.
This is protecting the asset. Protecting the asset. Okay.
In case of relocation.
Are we okay with that one?
Is that viable? Can we get something like that? I want to do the one that's gonna get the most bang.
Well, we won't know until we do that.
Just doing it as an exercise too. We're gonna, next meeting, let's power map more of them. Well, we have Jamie here, go through the process, thinking through this one together.
I might offer that if it's an exercise, might be well spent on the very basic. Sounds like things probably need to be statutory and legislative as opposed to any sort of administrative change. So the very basic, can we lobby for legislation that creates an agency that will be charged with overseeing mobile home parks, right? Because if there was an idea to create legislation around a 30-day right to move, somebody's got to give that to you. I don't know. That
we could do a more generalized power map. If we were going to tackle legislative reforms around these issues and others, we could do a very generalized power map. Who are our known allies? Yep. Known ogres, known champions. We could do that. That might be easier to tackle. That's a great idea. I need a eraser.
People on Zoom are still okay.
How's everyone on Zoom doing? Chat to me if you're unhappy or need to. Okay. I'm trying to think of a way to help people on Zoom see this whiteboard.
If we go back one slide, they can have the same grid that we're going to create. Yeah. On this whiteboard.
Kath, are you still up for taking some notes on the Zoom whiteboard as we go through this? And then I'll be able to take a picture of or have somebody take a picture of the whiteboard that's here and make sure it ends up getting emailed out or something like that.
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know how to, I can take notes on paper. I don't know how to write it on the board. That's the problem. I haven't practiced with it or anything. So I tried. We'll see.
Okay.
Why don't we just all do it together?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So I guess I would start with the groups that are in this room. You know we've got AMHO in the group. We know they're going to be strongly supportive of the reforms.
What's that one?
What's that?
What are we looking at? Like, what is the topic or what are we?
This is generalized legislative reform. If we were to tackle an initiative or a series of initiatives at the legislature, so we're focusing on the legislature, we're identifying who's going to be our likely friends and foes, and then how much relative power or influence do they have.
I'm sorry.
The top of the grid is the most influential.
Okay.
Bottom, least influential. To the right here along the side is who's going to be strongly supportive. And then on the left is who's going to be strongly opposed, vehemently opposed. And then generalized reform efforts at the ledge is the overarching topic. So, I mean, when we think about this, we are thinking caucus level, at the state ledge, and also individual lawmakers. I know there have been champions that have sponsored bills in the past. I think individual names need to go on. When we think about, we're always dealing with like the League of Cities and Towns or like the city or the county folks, thinking in terms of decision makers at the local, county, city level, state level. Even when we're pursuing state legislative action, those local government electeds can be really powerful voices. So thinking broadly beyond just state legislators can be helpful. And at this point, it's a brainstorming session. We're just throwing names or people up on the wall and trying to place them somewhere near where we think they're going to land. Yeah.
First time I've done this, but
okay.
To maybe get it started, it seems like the Attorney General would be in the top right somewhere. I don't want to speak for her, but
no, I was going to volunteer and say I'll say our office. Our current administration, we strongly support this issue, so we are on the right side of the X or Y axis. Now, our office doesn't pass laws. I believe we have one lobbyist on staff, so we have some, influence in this area, but we are essentially an enforcement agency. So I would say we're probably like maybe just above the Y axis or the X axis there, but pretty far on the right side. Yeah, like
maybe here.
There.
Sure.
Makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah. I don't know how state house politics here in Arizona yet, so that does make sense. And I would assume that almost in the same spot on the left side would be the Association of Mobile Home Park Owners, not the residents, not AMHO, but whoever. There's got to be an association of landlords, and they would be opposed to this.
How influential do we feel like they are?
Very.
Pretty darn. Okay. Maybe up here then.
Not that high.
Okay. Here?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So like on the vertical axis, right in the middle, on most influential, like swing legislative voters, like people who are in the legislature who could vote either direction. Very influential, neither strongly opposed or strongly supportive.
Kind of uncommitted legislators.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Representative Gress, Gress, has been supportive of mobile home issues. There we go. Now I see it.
Oh, there we go. That looks good. So if we were to put Representative Matt Gress over here, he wouldn't go above the Attorney General, would he?
No. No.
So Betty Villegas?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Strongly supported.
Who?
Betty Villegas.
Okay.
What do you think, Ryan? Betty? Okay. Same kind of area as Representative Gress?
Okay.
Is she in the Senate?
She's in the House.
She's in the, okay. I don't know if I'm spelling it right. Okay.
How do you represent, and I don't know who they are, but there have got to be, I assume, a large number of free market, small government, probably ours in the legislature that have a lot of influence when it comes to actually passing legislation. So we've got to, be realistic and put a big old box or circle to represent that lobby or that caucus.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And they're going to be relatively opposed.
One would think, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of
But
there's a lot.
okay.
And I think that the representatives that we've identified will help us to identify.
Yeah.
Yeah, this like would have been a good meeting to have like a rep at, you know, like it's been interesting.
So we're doing this at the state level. How about locally?
I think local should go on there because local, mayors can kind of push.
Kevin Dahl is a supporter.
Some of our
City council person.
Yep, he's a city council and Ward 4, Ward 3.
3.
Yeah.
I think 1, 3, 5, 6 probably.
Yeah, 6 absolutely.
Yeah.
1, 3, 5, and 6.
And even for something else.
Can I add something? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Lower right corner, strongly supportive, but not very influential. Resident associations. Park resident associations. Strongly supportive, but not very influential, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, I put them in the bottom right. Strongly supportive, not as influential.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure where they go, but chambers of commerce, and also utility companies, more so for the other issues, but like TRICO, TEP, and then the Phoenix, Cox Communications too, and something.
And those utility companies are not the ones that are profiting, right? It is the park owners. So they have an interest in getting paid, of course, and probably quite influential for the utility company voice.
Right.
Why would they be supportive? One would, thinking that if we're talking about a bad actor park that might be an out-of-state corporation who doesn't see or care about the residents, they probably have a big balance sheet. They're probably paying TEP on time every month.
Yeah.
Why would TEP support submetering and having to chase down 20 separate utility bills every month? I'm not saying they shouldn't do that,
right?
But for this exercise, why would they be supportive of that type of legislation?
I mean, I think Claire's hand raised too.
Oh,
do you want to stop that, Claire?
Yeah, just to respond to that comment about TEP, I think it depends on if we can get each utility on board. TEP seems most on board, in my opinion. out of all of the utilities, or at least specific staff members do. But they would be charging residents more per kilowatt hour. And they would get a larger basic service charge because they'd be charging each group individually. So they would actually increase their revenue if it was direct metered instead of sub metered.
Thank you. Answers my question directly.
What other options are there? I mean, even if it's a big corporation, well, I could try to get their electricity through TEP and through Southwest Gas. I mean, they're very limited.
TEP focuses a lot, though, on community support.
Yeah.
And I do see them, being as supportive as they can be given some of the limitations that they face given the mobile home parks. Like when a resident signs a contract, to pay in their weeks to pay so much, then that pretty much ties TEP's hands. But so I can see them being supportive of something that would help the residents.
Not necessarily because you're going to get more money for income, but have a community there. Members of the community.
I think they want the good law.
And I think like Trico is cooperatively owned as well. So that hits differently. If there are places that are, co-op. That's right. Shareholders.
Who did you share before? Utility companies? I can't remember.
Chambers of Commerce.
Chambers, yes. Okay.
And I don't know where they are.
Well, they're certainly influential, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we know they're on the influential side, but how supportive?
Have we done any studies as to how many? Ray said that we don't really even know how many mobile home parks there are. Do we have a general idea, a list? Do they belong to one of the chambers? Do they?
I could probably get that down if you're,
Because I'm wondering,
I could do it. Well, it'll be assessment.
how many mom and pops versus corporations?
Our chambers largely pro-business, pro-market, so I would kind of see them leaning on that support.
Yeah. That's my gut instinct, but I don't know how valid that is. But I'll put it right over here just because we know they're influential and it's likely we'd have opposition.
Voy a decirlo en español también. También hay que pensar como quién más en la comunidad puede apoyar con eso. Como ¿qué otros grupos podemos llamar como mamás con poder? Son lo que pienso. Like when I'm thinking about what are the other community groups? Well, las iglesias, we have the Pima County Interfaith here too with the communities of faith. Mamás con poder are another really strong local group. What other local groups?
Nonprofits.
Nonprofits.
We council money would be supported. I don't know how influential we would be. I don't see us being very influential, but we're definitely supportive.
Right.
I think there are large nonprofits like Children's House, like both Primavera, Casa Community Services.
Yeah.
Lots of drives.
Yeah. Yeah.
I went to see them. They have to open now. Podría ser también Broadway.
Casa María.
Sure.
Y Casa María tiene dinero también. And then Casa María is like there's somebody's like went all together que tiene recursos, ¿verdad? Casa María conoce mucha gente, ¿verdad? Hemos visto el poder que tiene allá en el sur de Tucson. Como cuántos miembros del concilio del sur de Tucson son de Casa María.
Yeah.
Like Casa María has so much power because they've door knocks on every door in South Tucson.
And Brian Knives Force of Nature.
Brian family.
Force of Nature.
Yeah.
So who should I be adding?
I wish it's all the nonprofits. So I'm putting a list of a whole bunch of nonprofits. So estoy viendo todos los grupos de organizaciones sin fines de lucro en un lugar. por poder casas móviles.
You had mentioned the interfaith group. I think that probably has some level of influence, but I don't know how much. And then generally supportive, right?
Churches and
yeah.
Right now, we have 18 member organizations that interfaith. There are leaders looking into what are issues because they're finding that people within their congregations with the local groups.
Need more room.
Yeah, it would make these.
I'm running out of room in this quadrant here.
Make the print smaller.
I'll have to. You're running out of room.
How about Housing Alliance?
Oh, she did went away.
What was that, Kat?
How about Arizona Housing Alliance? Are you on there, Jamie?
Yeah. It's like, I don't know how influential we are.
Supportive.
Supportive, certainly supportive. They probably put us right here. I don't think we're very.
Yeah, paid lobbyists.
We do. Maybe that puts us above the line here.
¿Alguien más que está opuesto de nosotras? Who else is opposed to us?
Yeah, let's look at that.
Yeah, in that empty quadrant, I might put like kind of the oddball tenant or the idiosyncratic resident out there who is just maybe doesn't want to be a CMP customer or doesn't want to be part of a community-owned organization, and so you're always going to have unpredictable opponents out there.
park owners.
Yeah, park owners. I put the association up here in influence, but
Individual park owners.
yeah.
I'll tell you what, I don't know any residents who don't want to be a direct customer of the utility.
And road.
I do know residents who don't want a resident-owned community.
What?
I do know many residents who don't want to be part of a resident-owned community.
Yes.
Like the co-op model.
Yeah, the example I was mentioning, we talked to some residents who still like having all the utilities on one bill. They don't have to think about, did I pay my TEP bill and my Tucson water bill and my Southwest gas bill? Like they like it all kind of bundled like that, even though they might be being overcharged.
Well, maybe they're being treated fairly, right? And so it's been great for them the whole time.
Right.
Most of us know how to use auto pay. Let's see. Park owners, are they on here? Because not everybody belongs to that association. But
the individual park owners.
Yeah. Put them in that bottom left quadrant because individually probably less influential than the association.
The people who make money from park owners, so I'm thinking of like their consulting firms, strategy, lawyers, things like that.
And the sub
management companies.
Yeah. Management companies.
So potentially strongly opposed how influential they are. If they're making a lot of money, they might be pretty influential.
Like ELS, all those, they're not owners, they're management companies.
So catering companies and management companies.
And just to time check, we have about 15 minutes left, so if you want to.
Yeah, we might have to, huh?
I'm curious what the next step is.
Well, I don't know how much time we're going to have. I do want to kind of go over some next steps so that we can talk about where do you go from here in terms of prioritizing stuff. So if we think about, okay, so we should probably take a picture of that. Sorry that my handwriting is the way that it is. Okay. Yeah. So power mapping is really only one part of the feasibility analysis. And one of the things I was going to share with you, Ray, is At the coalition, we go through this multi-phase process of ideation, kind of what we did at the start, where we lay it all out there. Here's all the things that we want to do, whether they're feasible or not. We do the ideation phase. Then we have a really kind of formulaic scoring system that we go through to rank things. So we'll give something a score between 1 and 5 in multiple categories. And power mapping is one of them. Who are your major players? You identify how powerful your ogres are, your opponents are, how powerful your allies are. Do you have a ready sponsor? Is the time right? Is the legislative makeup right? All of these things get a score in a column. And then you end up totaling all of those scores. And that helps you prioritize, like, what could we tackle this session? And one of the things that I was talking with Ray about earlier this week is realistically, even at the coalition, we are in the business of advocacy, and it's our major focus. And we tried to advance 4 bills last session, and it was a lot to manage. Not because 4 bills is so hard, but because 50 other things came up that we had to fight against. And so as you're thinking about how many things you want to really focus on, my advice would be to land somewhere in that 1 to 4 priority levels, maybe no more than 5. 5 is too many. Let's be realistic. 5 is too many. But if you can get it to a handful, because there's going to be pieces of legislation that come through that you're going to have to mobilize against, or somebody else is pursuing something that you want to rally around that's going to require your time and effort, and testimony and outreach to get the blitz of contacts to happen. So one of the things I was going to share with you, Ray, and potentially that's an activity for a next session, is going through that scoring process. And that's where you look at the time, the legislative makeup, the potential sponsors, do you have template bill language, all of the things that kind of go into considering how and when to put forward the policy objective. For next steps, I'll probably hand that over to you guys. If there is an opportunity for continued collaboration, I'd be glad to continue to participate. But I don't want to take over your stuff, because you guys have done so much work to identify kind of the different pieces that could be pursued. And thinking of it in terms of short term, meaning this legislative session, medium term, maybe next legislative session, the 2-year cycle, if we look at the next 2-year cycle post-election, and then longer range, what could we potentially do in the next 5 to 10 years? Because things can change. When you look at the legislative makeup at the state level, it's close. It's not quite as close as it was a year ago, but it's close, and things can change. Legislative cycle, election cycle to election cycle. So we could be in a different place a year and 2 months from now. Hopefully we get. Yeah. But yeah, I guess, is there anything, I know we don't have a ton of time left, less than 10 minutes. So should we just open it up for questions or discussion, or?
Including on Zoom too. I'll stop at a share. Folks who are on chat, feel free to chime in. I couldn't see the chat while I was screen sharing. I see, Claire, you made a comment about one of the ACC commissioners.
Do you want me to share that comment? Sorry.
Sure.
Oh yeah, for the power mapping, I was just saying that ACC Commissioner Leah Marquez Peterson, I don't know where she stands on this issue, but she tends to be consumer oriented. So I think if we framed the issue to her in the right way and approached it at a strategic moment, that she would probably get on board, and she is like medium low influence, I think. But she's lives in Tucson, so
City ACC member based in Tucson.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to say that this is very helpful for AMHO to help us pare down the many things that we would like to do. And I really appreciate, Jamie, the help that you gave us in giving us kind of a framework for doing that. So thank you for that. I might come back to you later and ask you to help more with that.
Absolutely. And what I'll do, Kath and Ray, is share this kind of scoring document that kind of explains how to go through that. Not that you have to use it, but it's just another tool to help pare down to get to a number of things that you can pursue realistically in any given time. So I'll send you that Word document, and then maybe we set up another time, or if there's any support I can offer at the next meeting, I'd be.
I wonder if, since these meetings are a little bit larger, say we're double than more in the room because there are more people on Zoom than there are here. Maybe between now and the next meeting, we could have a policy team meeting that really walked through some of the scoring and brought some initial information to the group, so that at our next full group meeting, we can say, these are some ideas of the scoring. Yeah, maybe they'll be a little bit off depending on people's input of who's there, but at least gives us a start, since there are so many proposals that we're thinking about, to help to kind of narrow down. And if each of the groups in the room who does their own lobbying, because we have here Arizona Housing Coalition, AMHO, Wildfire. Is there anyone else in the room whose organization has a policy agenda and funding where they are planning on proposing legislation this year? That's still pretty good, having 3 nonprofits here who have paid lobbyists.
So I was debating about whether to say anything about this, but I think I need to. As of yesterday, we are looking for a new lobbyist for AMHO. So if you have people that you think might be a good fit with us, please shoot me an email. We've got a list already started, but it's going to have to happen really fast. And it was by the lobbyist choice, not us. Yeah. And it had to do with the approaching any type of a rent issue at all. Anything. Even in the future.
Beth, I'll send you some ideas. Not Beth. All right. The other thing I wanted to plug, well, I've got folks, is the coalition has policy committee updates regularly during the state legislative session. Admittedly, we probably don't pay enough. We haven't paid enough attention to mobile home and manufactured housing, but now that I'm connected with you guys, I feel like we can do a better job here. I think there's an opportunity if folks want to connect. Again, it's kind of representative of that whole continuum. So it's a broader kind of topic area, but there is, there's no obligation or anything. We just hold these regular Zoom meetings during the state legislative session. And then those folks that sign up for these advocacy alerts can get notices of things that are coming up. We try to track as much as we can. We know we're not capturing everything, but we do try to relay the latest of what's happening at the state and federal level and provide easy ways to weigh in. So I can send that around, a sign up. It's just an online sign up, no obligation. You don't have to be a member of the coalition or anything to sign up for these advocacy alerts. But I did want to plug that.
it's kind of a lull right now. We've been sharing kind of updates on the federal side as major events have happened, but things will really ramp up again as the legislative session gets started. And then we also are planning a day at the Capitol, which would be awesome to have folks there. So right now, our event application is pending with the Capitol grounds. And so I can't give you a date. Our first priority date is like the first Thursday of February. We chose like February 5th, but we would accept this other date, the 12th. So I'll let folks know when we get that finalized, but that's going to be an opportunity if organizations want to set up a table or a booth on the Capitol grounds. We're going to have exhibitor tables. We're going to be serving lunch. We're going to be arranging small group meetings with lawmakers, and really try to have a show of representation. Yes, a show of strength and support. We'll probably do a press conference there. Last year, we started a bipartisan housing and homelessness caucus made up of 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, folks from the House and the Senate. That was the first year we did it. Kind of had some successes, but I think we'll have those folks there to share. So that's just direct access to lawmakers and potential to build some more relationships and educate, share, and gain some allies. So I'll share that out too.
And I'll send out a survey after this meeting with all of the policy proposals that were brought to this meeting and the ones that came out of this meeting to kind of rank them too, to see of the 35 people who are in this meeting today, which ones people are the most excited about in terms of impact, which ones people are most excited about in terms of I really think this could pass this year, as we're coming together at the next meeting with our ideas of proposal, short, medium, long-term goals. Thank you. Anyone else we're at 1 minute. Your final thoughts on anyone who hasn't gotten to speak today, especially?
Ray, it's Jan. Jordan, are we going to try to map out a timeline for each of the issues? What length of time we think it could be reasonably accomplished, so we can kind of look at what our priorities are and how long they're going to take, and we may want to move some around to get the ones that can be done more quickly, more upfront.
That sounds like a great idea. Maybe put that in the survey of which ones you prioritize as short-term goals, medium-term goals, long-term goals, and really try to flush that out over the course of this month. I think the other thing about if we're deciding on policy priorities is having a meeting that's not in the middle of the afternoon on a weekday in the mobile home parks. Really, I think having this space to flush out what are the details of what legally needs to happen for this to be viable, but then making sure that it's a much more broad base of residents, and know that some of the people in the room work with very deep, broad bases of residents. Maybe planning for November, maybe a evening session with residents that's not so focused on kind of legal language, but that's much more accessible and connected to people's lived experiences of living this out. But I'd like to distill it more first to make sure that we really know how the process legally would go through.
I'm impressed how well you have pushed things along, Ray. I mean, I've been in other groups and meetings where you meet, you talk about the problem, and it's and you're really good at pushing things along. And so I just wanted to say that.
Get things done. Thanks to Jamie for really filling this gap of how we power map and make that decision. It's a lot of knowledge you're bringing. It's a great moment. And thanks to all folks who came on Zoom today. Thanks to Alina, the support that I was here. It ended up being great that you were on Zoom. Yeah, I appreciate you all.
Ray?
Yeah.
Just a last minute thought. Would and I'm not a real political, I don't understand all the politics and But what about the Pima County Board of Supervisors? Would that be an organization that we would want to add to that chart in some way?
Absolutely. Let's do that. Both the Board of Supervisors and the Pima County Regional Affordable Housing Commission and the City of Tucson Commission on Equitable Housing and Development. I think once we get a little priority worked out, we should totally start talking to supervisors.
Maybe have a group that would put together a presentation to do to them or to send to them.
I think they're going to be supportive.
I would think so. I would hope so.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
And
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
So your comment about AMHO, just for folks in the room here, AMHO is hosting listening sessions for residents all over the state in 8 AMHO districts. We had our first one Saturday, expected 48, and we got 62 in Cottonwood, Arizona.
And what was the purpose?
Do you want to talk about that, Kat?
Oh, sure. Our listening sessions we shared some information about what AMHO is planning and doing. And then we took most of the time to just have residents share what issues are most important to them that they care about. We took really good notes. We're compiling everything, giving people a chance to feel heard and to let them know and to kind of use that information when we set our priorities. We have some ideas already because we get calls every day from people all over the state. But this was an opportunity to meet in person within the districts and kind of have them be heard and get to know the people that represent them with AMHO, because we have directors for each district.
Is it going to be in the form of like a survey that you could share the results with, say, the Attorney General's office and other organizations or
yes,
governmental departments?
Yes, we do a survey that everybody takes there too, and we can share those. And also we're collecting, and not just at these meetings, but online, we're collecting utility bills and rent increase letters from all over the state. And we intend to amalgamate that information, have kind of a summary of it too. We're trying to pick out trouble spots where there might be some weird utility bills, and also look at the master metering situation, because we know which parks are master metered, which ones aren't.
I would think that anyone that's going to be up for election, again, would be interested in over 400,000 constituents that are in mobile homes as a voting block. And maybe that would be the perspective from which the information could be presented.
Yeah, we actually invited them to come and listen, not to campaign, but to listen. And nobody came to the first one, but we're going to keep trying.
Well, I think if the media gets wind of the survey in its final form, that might be one way of having them listen and then distribute it to them.
Exactly. Yeah, we plan to.
Everyone.
You.
Thanks, friends.
Thanks to all of you that helped make this work for the Zoom participants. It turned out well.
Yeah, that's great.
Sorry, no, I just put this back. Me and
I think I'm going to go.
Yes.
When is the next meeting?
Talking about November?
You try to.
The third, what's the day? The third Thursday in September? Should be the third Thursday in October.
In October, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.